Man, I gotta be honest, I haven't thought of this story in actual years. Like, I was out on a walk today, I passed some guys who I used to go to high school with, we chatted for a little bit, and oh my god, it just brought back a whole flood of fucking memories. And let me tell you, while I have a lot of good memories from high school, I think I gotta talk about the one that was easily the most ridiculous, because these events are so stupid that I basically had to get police involved to get the high school to fucking stop. And yeah, that's one hell of a way to start the story. But I can remember going back to high school, not going back, I can remember going to high school back when I was like 15, 16 years old. I'm like 24 now almost. And you know, back in the day, I lived close enough, well, technically I still do, but I lived close enough to the high school where if I really wanted to, I could walk anywhere else within like a mile radius and get to the high school in time. I was always a walker for my high school years going to the school. I stopped taking the school bus after middle school. So what I would always do is I used to go up to Sheets and stuff like that. We have Sheets and Turkey Hills around here. And I would always go to Sheets or Turkey Hill first, then walk all the way back towards the high school before starting my school day, because I had enough time to do this in the morning and I had the money to do this. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna get an energy drink every day before starting school. And for a while, this went fine. This went completely normal with no issues. But then, the school started like, I don't know what happened here. I guess some incident happened with another walker, and then they got super paranoid about people walking back and forth from school. So they literally tried to put out a policy saying you have to walk straight from your house to school or straight from school to your house. And mind you, there's no way to enforce this, obviously. They can't send out, like, and also this is actually a crime too because it would be stalking, but you can't send out school officials to follow everybody home and make sure they get home, obviously. But they didn't try to do that, obviously. But they literally tried to enforce a policy saying you can only walk here to school or from school to your house, which was some of the stupidest stuff I've ever seen in my life. Like, how do you even enforce that when some of the walkers literally live on the other side of town? Like, that's the thing that always got to me. It's like, how do you enforce this logically? You can't. This isn't a legal mandate. And I would love to see somebody not raise shit over getting punished for walking to the store first and then school, or anything similar to that. I actually used to know people who preferred taking extended walks before going to school. I literally knew people who would extend the amount of time they had to walk just so they would spend more time walking throughout the day than sitting in a classroom, which is actually hilarious to me. Oh man. But anyway, they put this policy into place, and then immediately, like a few weeks afterwards, I keep getting called up to the principal's office almost religiously. The vice principals and all that too, the office itself, they would have office staff yell at me. Like, they would literally get every person in that school to yell at me who was an adult because I would go to the store first and then go to school because of this policy they put into place. And also, if your schools had a similar policy, I'd be very curious, because how the heck do they enforce this stuff? Well, actually, they can, and I'm about to get into that. So it eventually got to a point one day where they wanted to put me in in-school suspension because I was apparently breaking the school's conduct code outside of the building. And this has been something that's been debated on in the United States for years now. How much control does a school have outside of the school parameters, which I believe should be fucking none. And even back then, I thought it should be fucking none. But, so they try to put me in school suspension, and obviously I skipped that shit. And then they tried saying, oh, well, you skipped in-school suspension, we're gonna give you double that, and then triple that. And so, essentially, I basically was a little bit of a jerk, and I'm like, you know what, let's prove a point. So, I got every single walker, basically, as many as I knew of. So, I got like 50 different people to sign off on a paper saying, none of us go back and forth to school directly in any case. A majority of people who walk back and forth don't follow this. You're never going to enforce this. And it was basically meant to be a show of, hey, you guys are clearly in the wrong here. A majority of your student bases doesn't listen to this flat out and acknowledges they will never listen to this. And so obviously the school tried to take this even further after that. And then it got to the point where they would call my parents up over this shit. So they got mad that I basically said, dude, nobody follows this. You're never gonna be able to enforce this back in the day. And then they get my parents involved. And oh my god, were they surprised to hear my parents didn't give a fuck? And my parents actually also actively thought that the policy was stupid. So they essentially reached a point where they just kept trying to pile on punishments throughout my sophomore year over this shit. And then it got to the greatest part of them all, which I call the head of the situation, where I basically did a bunch of research. I'm like, is this even legal? And as far as I can tell, at least in the state of Pennsylvania, the schools can't regulate where you go before or after school. The only thing is they're supposed to keep you safe on the routes to school, from all my research and what I could gather. So it literally got to the point where I had to go to the schools basically truant officer. Because keep in mind, the high schools in my area, they get real police officers who are on duty to act as security guards, and these guys are active police officers during the time. And so, I just go up to him and I'm like, okay, is this even allowed? Is this even legal? Can they actually punish me for this shit? Will this ever be held up anywhere? And he basically said no. And that's the funniest part, because I think that's the only moment in my life where I liked a police officer, because he literally just flat out explained to me, no, they can't do this. It's just that nobody's gonna really be bothered to tell them not to. And so then I pushed the matter even further, and I got the local police involved. I'm like, hey, they are majorly overstepping their boundaries. Is there anything they can do? And then it turns out the fucking police put in a complaint against the high school. Oh my god. Okay, I actually had to cut some of the video footage there, because I quickly realized while I was joking, we're talking about a school, and maybe some jokes are better left not addressed in front of a school, but overall, what do you guys think about this? The fact that this even happened to me, or happened to anybody, really? Did schools you guys attend have policies for this? Did your local state laws help protect you against overreach from the school and all that stuff? I'm actually really fucking curious. Because once I remembered the story, I'm just like, I really gotta sit down and talk about this on YouTube. Because this is probably the only moment of my life where I can actually think of when the school tried to massively overreach. And obviously you have smaller stories like the school handing out punishments for fights that would happen outside of school and all that shit. I'm not really focused on that, but this was actual proper overreach in my opinion. And let me tell you, both in the moment and retrospectively, I'm glad that actual law enforcement was like, yo, you guys gotta stop. But what did you guys think of this story? Did you even think it was a good story or not? Did you guys laugh? Anything like that? I'm just curious, honestly. And seriously though, let me know if your schools ever did shit like this either. I've been Johnny Von Duke, and I'll see you all later. Bye.